China has developed a space weapon that can creep into the tailpipes of enemy satellites, where it would grab on and hide, waiting for the right time to blow up. Here are the details. The South China Morning Post reports that Chinese scientists say they've created a space weapon that attaches itself to the inside of an enemy satellite's booster exhaust cone. The scientists published their weapon research in the Chinese journal Electronic Technology and Software Engineering in September. They say that the weapon is designed to fit snugly in the exhaust cones of the gas boosters that move satellites around. The device weighs only 3.5 kilograms and, once it has entered the exhaust cone, would use an electric motor to extend a thin probe that can pass through the narrowest part of the booster. Once inside the booster chamber, the probe would expand to keep the device firmly attached and hidden inside the exhaust cone. The device can then wait for a long time before it detonates a special melt-cast explosive that burns slowly, simulating an engine malfunction and severely damaging the satellite. The scientists say the probe's attachment sequence can also be reversed to release the weapon from the target. The South China Morning Post says the U.S. military has already voiced concerns about China's Shijian-17, an experimental probe with a robotic arm that has conducted some unusual maneuvers since its launch in 2016. The huge 30-meter-tall core of a Chinese rocket is tumbling wildly through low Earth orbit and could crash anywhere on Earth in the coming days. The same type of Chinese rocket crashed into a village in West Africa a year ago. Here are the details. On Wednesday, April 28th, China launched a massive Long March 5B rocket that carried the first module of its planned space station into orbit. The Guardian reports that the core stage of this rocket was supposed to fall back to Earth in a controlled descent, but something went wrong, and the 30-meter-tall rocket stage started skipping on Earth's atmosphere. And no one knows where it will crash once the drag of Earth's atmosphere tugs it down to the planet's surface. Much of the core will likely burn up in the atmosphere, but there is a chance that some chunks of debris will survive their re-entry and rain down on the land or ocean. This, sadly, wouldn't be the first time. In May 2020, a Long March 5B rocket slammed through the atmosphere, partially burning up during its descent. The core fell largely into the Atlantic Ocean, but some debris landed in West Africa. According to the South China Morning Post, some chunks of debris crashed into houses and villages in Côte d'Ivoire, though thankfully no casualties were reported. On Tuesday, May 4th, the latest out-of-control Chinese rocket was orbiting Earth around once every 90 minutes at a speed of about 27,600 kilometers per hour and an altitude of more than 300 kilometers. The U.S. military has named it 2021-035B, and its path can be seen on websites that track objects in Earth's orbit. China says it's ready to become the first country to land and operate a rover on Mars on its first attempt. China's first-ever Mars mission arrived in Mars orbit a few months ago and is scheduled to release its Mars lander in a few days. Here are the details. The Chinese National Space Administration, or CNSA, says its Tianwen-1 orbiter will release its Zhurong Mars rover on May 17th. The orbiter arrived in Mars orbit on February 24th, carrying with it the rover and its landing cradle. The lander will detach from the orbiter and start to descend into Mars's thin atmosphere, protected by a heat shield that's designed to also slow the lander down with its sheer bluntness. Once the lander slows down enough, a large parachute will open and the heat shield will fall away, exposing the landing cradle. The cradle's landing legs would then deploy and the parachute would detach to let the lander fall freely. The CNSA says the lander would then fire a number of rockets to slow its descent, while also keeping the lander in an upright position until it touches down. After touchdown, the lander would deploy a ramp while the rover deploys its sensor arms and solar panels. If the mission is successful, China would become the first country to land a rover on Mars on its first attempt. The Zhurong rover is carrying 6 pieces of scientific equipment. After landing, it would survey the surroundings to study Martian soil, geomorphology, and atmosphere. It would also look for signs of subsurface water ice. It's that time again. Remain indoors if at all possible, stock up on food, and if you must go out, whatever you do, keep your eyes fixed on the sky at all times. Of course, what we're talking about is the fact that China has just launched a new rocket into space, and we all know what happens when it does that, right? Regular viewers will remember that the Long March 5B rocket it used to send the Tianhe module of its space station into orbit memorably crashed to Earth last month, causing widespread criticism. So the question now is, what could be falling on our heads next? Here's what you need to know. China has launched 3 astronauts up to its new space station from its Zhoushan Satellite Launch Center in northwest China, according to Space.com, its first crewed mission in almost 5 years. The astronauts are aboard the Shenzhou 12 spaceship, which was propelled by a Long March 2F Y-12 rocket, according to the Associated Press. Space.com reports that Shenzhou 12's launch is the third of 11 required to build China's new space station, which it expects to complete before 2023. Already in position are the Tianhe core module, which contains the astronauts' living quarters, and the robotic Tianzhou 2 cargo craft, which attached to the core module late last month. Shenzhou 12 will dock with the core module, and the astronauts will then spend 3 months aboard. Tianhe is the third set of living quarters China has sent up to space after Tiangong 1 and Tiangong 2. However, it is much larger than those vessels at 54 feet or 16.6 meters long versus their 34 feet or 10.4 meters. The core module contains 3 separate bedrooms and 3 times more interior space than its predecessors, Space.com reports, citing China's state-run press agency Xinhua. Once they have docked, the 3 astronauts will set up testing and experiments and conduct a series of spacewalks, according to the Associated Press. 2 further lab modules called Wentian and Mengtian will complete the space station when they are attached to either side of Tianhe next year, according to Space.com, leaving it about 15% of the size of the International Space Station. The launch of the Tianhe module last month was criticized after part of the rocket that carried it to space made an uncontrolled re-entry to Earth. However, Ji Qiming, assistant director of China's manned space agency, dismissed the possibility of that happening again, according to the Associated Press. China has published the rocket's trajectory, and it is expected to burn up well before it could cause any danger, he said. So China says we should all be safe this time, and Xi even took the time to offer out a hand of friendship regarding the use of its new station. Outer space is the commonwealth of people all over the world, and exploring the universe is the shared cause of all mankind, Xi said. He then added, I believe that in the near future, when the Chinese space station is complete, we will see Chinese and foreign astronauts taking on joint missions to the Chinese space station. Of course, in international politics, altruism should always be viewed with some suspicion, and there it is clear that China sees space as an important source of power. In fact, with the Associated Press reporting that the Chinese station is intended to be used for 15 years, it is likely to outlast the International Space Station, which is nearing the end of its lifespan. This could mean that very soon humanity's only working space station is owned by China. That's a very interesting position for the US to be in, given it blocked Chinese involvement in the International Space Station. The U.S. Director of National Intelligence says China's upcoming space station poses a threat to America's national security. This is part of an annual intelligence report that explains how the Chinese space station forms part of Beijing's bigger effort to compromise U.S. security. Here are the details. The U.S. Director of National Intelligence released a report last month claiming that China's upcoming space station poses a threat to national security. This adds to experts calling for the U.S. to prepare a space defense system. Many claim that the U.S.'s current satellite infrastructure is very vulnerable to attack. Seeing that much of the U.S. military strategy is based on satellite technology like GPS, this does not seem to be an important issue for the U.S. The intelligence report also said that China is readying counter-space weapons to target U.S. satellites. Beijing continues to train its military space elements and field new ground and space-based anti-satellite weapons, the report said. That means they're developing things such as spacecraft that can intercept and capture U.S. satellites with robotic arms, or simply destroy the satellites. The report states that China is already operating ground-based anti-satellite missiles intended to destroy satellites in Earth's orbit, and ground-based lasers that can blind or damage space-based sensors in Earth's orbit. In February, researchers at the Center for Strategic and International Studies released a report titled Defense Against the Dark Arts in Space, Protecting Space Systems from Counter-Space Weapons. It details countermeasures the U.S. can take to defend against anti-satellite weapons.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.